Hello there and welcome. It is Big Pooch for Should Have Been a Starter, talking all things Rugby Championship, and what a weekend that was. Maybe not the best rugby, but certainly the results. No doubt the highlight of the weekend being the Los Pumas' first win in Argentina against the All Blacks. Of course, they've beaten the All Blacks fairly regularly, both in Sydney over COVID and then a couple of times in New Zealand over these past few years. So to get one at home will no doubt be incredible for Argentinian rugby. And that bipartisan crowd in Buenos Aires, wow. It's something the Argentinian faithful certainly offer more than South Africans, Aussies and Kiwis. That sort of soccer, football-like atmosphere was superb. And then on the other side of the draw, we've seen South Africa beat just a valiant Wallabies team. And my word, that Wallabies team have a lot to look forward to. Joe Schmidt, the thought of him leaving consistently sort of frustrates and almost disappointing each time, given you've seen the progression of him taking over from Eddie Jones, and with almost each game seeing depth building, seeing the team really play a really good style of rugby. And certainly what I've been most impressed by over the last few games, including the back end of that British and Irish Lions series, is more composure. The ability not to down tools and ultimately get hammered. So I'll run through my quick thoughts on both games, starting off with the New Zealand-Argentina game, then the Springboks game, and where that leaves us moving into the Rugby Championship and the next series of games. Wow, it is all to play for. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. We'd love to get your thoughts on your predictions over this next week's games, where you think the Argentina-Australia series is going, and both the South Africa and New Zealand series. Let's jump into it. Last week I did mention that I was a little bit disappointed. Well, I was quite disappointed with the Argentina team on the basis that any time they got back into the game and gave themselves a chance of being competitive, they gave it away through both ill discipline and basic mistakes. They looked extremely vulnerable to the All Blacks maul and the scrum. And I really just didn't think New Zealand had to get out of third gear, which is both a compliment for New Zealand. Beating Argentina away is never an easy game in this day and age. Equally, were they pushed? Now, I certainly still don't think Argentina played exceptionally well. I thought there was a number of chances that they left a begging throughout the game. But what we did see is classic Argentinian rugby, in a sense of the first 2 minutes of the game. We saw handbags, a bit of a scrap, a bit of a argy-bargy, which for me is classic Argentinian rugby. A bit of fisticuffs, a bit of scrap, a bit of niggle. They really seem to feed off that. The Kremers, the Materas, they really seem to feed off that. Now, I know Kremer only came on in the second half, but that is Argentinian rugby. And while New Zealand, I thought, started the game far better, we saw a couple of injuries, both to Ratimer, who I thought played really well. He was given the platform to play well, but equally executed. I'm not sure where Christie is in his game and whether he's quite up to it, but he comes on. Taylor for his 100th cap, and what a servant he's been to All Black rugby. Goes down the short side after a line out. Christie gets the ball moving very quickly, and the tenacity Christie has to get to the other end of the field and give a quick little pop pass to Proctor. New Zealand looked tasty early on. They looked tasty. What we did see is throughout the game, no matter how many chances Argentina seemingly threw away at points, their intensity in the contact, in the collision, at the breakdown, classic Argentinian rugby, making the breakdowns messy, disruptive, painful for the opposition. That part of the game, they never relinquished. Their forward pack certainly dominated the game overall. Now, I'll be honest, I knew the score watching the game. And when I saw Will Jordan give away a needless yellow card, I mean, that's something the coach needs to give a big slap on the wrist to. That's you don't get away with that in this day and age, which then soon led on to the yellow card for Tupu Vai. I'm there as a fan thinking, right, this is where Argentina, 15 against 13, put out a big lead, and New Zealand will no doubt valiantly fight back and come up short. What we see is two golden opportunities go begging, one through a brilliant tackle from Beauden Barrett to cause a knock-on, but two golden opportunities go begging for Argentina. And then we see Beauden Barrett with a chance to actually take a 3-point lead over that period. And I'm thinking, how with Argentina, with 15 against 13, potentially going to be coming out negative after that period of rugby? Now, what that leads on to is certainly a discussion of Beauden Barrett and his kicking. Dwight Eaglehoff, a good friend of mine and certainly a guy who's done podcasts with me on rugby, who is in New Zealand, certainly more technical, astute. He told me years ago that Beauden Barrett wasn't good enough off the tee. And when you're thinking of a guy who was not long off winning, 2 World Player of the Year titles, you're sort of going, okay, mate, albeit wasn't convinced, realizing what he had said and actually paying more attention to it. I think his goal kicking progressively got worse, and hence the emergence of an outstanding Richie Mwanga has left Beauden Barrett a little bit in limbo, I think, with his career, whether he's 15, 10. I mean, an outstanding rugby player, brilliant skill set. But the second difference of this game, not only was the forward pack of Argentina dominate the Kiwi pack, but we saw the difference in kicking throughout the game. Albanos, who I'm a huge fan of, goes off early, around the same time as Ratimer. Carreras comes on, makes a couple of good breaks. But where the difference is in the synergy with the South African game, Pollard and O'Connor, Carreras and Barrett, is the goal kicking. Carreras goes 5 for 5. And goal kicking allowed Argentina to keep the game at arm's length against New Zealand. Now, what I was surprised about, similar to the South Africans the week before at Ellis Park, was there seemed to be a lack of leadership to grab the game by the scruff of the neck in the second half by the All Blacks. Where again was the stop the bleeding, let's set up a phase play off a line out, let's build some momentum and maintain possession. I think they ended up with something like 40% possession, the All Blacks. I mean, that is a damning indictment for an All Blacks team who thrive on possession and ball in hand. There seemed to be a lack of leadership, similar to when South Africa were leaking points against Australia the previous week, around getting back to Rugby 101, set piece, building some momentum, and playing territory. The Argentinians seem to be coming at them each and every occasion with such intensity. They certainly seem to be outpassioned the All Blacks. And while they had left a number of points and opportunities are begging. New Zealand never really looked to get the game by the scruff of the neck. A lot of questions, certainly under the high ball for the back three. South Africa will be licking their lips at the sight of the Kiwis' inability to effectively handle the high ball. Will certainly have South Africa excited about what they could achieve at Eden Park. And moving on to Cape Town, the DHL Stadium was not a friend of rugby in a sense. The pitch looked awful, albeit partisan crowd looked terrific. The South Africans, similar to the week before, getting off to a really solid start with Andre Pollard at the helm. Brilliant kick across. Unfortunately, Caden Moody, that may have been his one and only highlight, really struggled to get into the game. Otherwise, looked lost thereafter. But what was interesting was seeing a chap who we'd assumed had played his last game, and what a last game it was for the Wallabies against the British and Irish Lions, winning their third test. Nick White showing a rich vein of form, albeit it is a small sample size, but quickly identifying Springboks napping off the back of the scrum and getting in Corey Toole through that grubber. Corey Toole, what a debut. The guy has got wheels to burn. Certainly in the second half, I would have said, rather than chipping that ball ahead, he should have given it on the inside and maintained ball in hand. Albeit, the fussy win at the breakdown could be disputed. But really, I thought he had a terrific game first up. And again, another opportunity for us to see a bit of depth for the Wallabies. The impression watching that first half, seeing Nick White and Tom Wright go off injured, is the Wallabies ultimately just won't have the depth to deal with the Springboks. Instead, we saw a very composed Wallabies. Now, where you may have a bit of criticism of the Wallabies, when you're thinking at 27 to the Springboks on the 36th minute, was a very similar score to Ellis Park the week before, but a far different feeling. The Springbok crowd, and there was certainly a sense that everyone was still a bit nervous of what had happened the week before. But equally, the Wallabies had far better possession and looked a far more composed unit than they did in the first half at Ellis Park, where the Springboks had absolutely steamrolled them. South Africa at the moment, I think, are really battling with a balance in their team. And what I mean by balance is, between playing the power game and releasing the creativity that we have at the back line. I'm a huge advocate for what Tony Brown has been brought in to do. You cannot, for me, let talented backs like South Africa has not being able to showcase their talent. I always used to think that had Brian Abana played for New Zealand, he would have 20 to 30 more tries. The amount of tries that he had to score, catching the ball, chipping over the top, beating three players, or intercepts, versus getting the ball, the bit of space, maybe one man to beat, that he would have got under the All Blacks. For me, I think that's where South Africa was certainly their next phase of evolution. Now, look, between swapping players, building depth, sometimes you can be a victim of your own success and a victim of what you're trying to accomplish, and maybe complicating things too much at points. So I do think South Africa are in the midst of a bit of transition. There are a couple of players that certainly won't make the 2027 World Cup. And so I do think it's about bedding in the new blood and giving them some regular game time. What I really liked was Grant Williams at 9 this week. Again, the idea of mixed his game up really well in those first 20 to 30 minutes at Ellis Park the week before, between kicking, running and passing, to then purely passing. And then there was that sense of, between fans and otherwise, that's his game. much like Marnie Lebok, his game is passing and releasing the backline. These players are far better skilled and have more well-rounded games. So I don't think you can categorise each of the scrum halves into one category. So it was good to see Grant Williams really mix up his game, a lot more kicking throughout the game, kicked really well, and I thought he played terrific. Backline, though, as a whole, in terms of that balance, really didn't fire at all. It was incredibly frustrating seeing the amount of opportunities wasted through poor passing, poor execution. The amount of knock-ons, you would think you could attribute a bit to the wet and muddy pitch, but the amount of passes that were going behind players and therefore then causing the knock-on, the execution of obstruction, it seemed comical at times. So while there seemed to be better structure throughout the game, the backline really is not on the same wavelength. And South Africa really, I think, seemed to really be mentally fragile from what had happened the week before. Had James O'Connor been more accurate with the boot, he started off kicking really well. They looked very good, Australia. They looked really composed despite the challenges of injuries, losing points. They never really seemed to lose their composure throughout the game. I'd say the only point where that actually happened was in the 72nd minute when Kellaway took his eye off the ball and knocked it on, and then South Africa scored that try and just about had enough to win the game. Joe Schmidt and the Wallabies are a force to be reckoned with. And while the injuries may eventually catch up with them, the likes of Will Skelton going back to La Rochelle in France may eventually be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of winning the Rugby Championship. Of all the four teams, I would certainly say the Wallabies have been the most impressive over the course of both games. Yes, Argentina with a terrific result and a historic win in Argentina against New Zealand, but poor for me the first game. Yes, South Africa have had patches of brilliance, but outside of that have again looked uncertain and potentially mentally fragile, where New Zealand again looked decent in the first game. Were they pushed? And when they were pushed, they didn't have answers. So we go into the next set of games in the Rugby Championship with it all to play for. But I would not be surprised with any result at the moment. I could certainly see Australia winning both the next two games. Equally, I could see Argentina winning the next two games. What are your thoughts? And then it is countdown to Operation Eden Park, where South Africa looked to be the first team to beat the All Blacks at Eden Park since 1994. South Africa not winning there since 1937. At the start of the tournament, we would have potentially assumed, despite knowing that it was going to be a competitive Rugby Championship, thinking that both New Zealand and South Africa would be coming in full of confidence with 2 wins under their belt. And here we have it. Both teams with uninspiring performances over the last 2 games. However, what we will see is 2 teams go hell for leather in these next 2 games. South Africa looking to build on their winning form of 4 games in a row against the All Blacks. The All Blacks looking to maintain their record at Eden Park. I will do another podcast in the lead up to the game. It will be interesting to see which routes both teams play. Do the All Blacks change the back 3, knowing that South Africa will target the high ball? What team does South Africa put out, knowing that it is near on impossible to predict what Rassie Erasmus will do? Has he got a trick up his sleeve, something we do not expect? The squad looks about what we would have expected, but do we see some changes? Who will play number 8 for the Springboks? Please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think will happen over the next couple of games. From my point of view, it feels like an NBA series. If anybody watches the NBA, as soon as it gets to the playoffs, it is a best of 7. And whenever each team has 2 wins each, 90% of the time, the team that wins the third game and therefore gives himself 2 further opportunities to win the next game and take the series, 90% of the time they win. I'm getting that feeling now coming into this next series. I think it'll be very difficult for whoever loses the next games to go on and win the Rugby Championship, without saying it's impossible. But I do think you'll have to win the next 3 games. So bonus points all to play for. It's getting that sense of make or break for all teams involved. And what a Rugby Championship we have this year. Certainly probably the most exciting in years. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Jot those down. Please like and subscribe. Thanks very much.